Good morning. I'm Kantei, the Vice President of USJI, US Japan Research Institute, and also the Vice President of Waseda University, one of the 5 founding member universities. And the USJI was established April 2009, now organized by 8 leading Japanese universities, and financially supported by business society of both the United States and Japan. And our mission is to dispatch policy-related research results and policy recommendation on global issues to both US and Japanese audiences. We have continuously held USJI Week twice a year in March and September. As the establishment of USJI, and during the last 6 years, we have changed Prime Minister almost every year. However, nowadays, coalition of the Liberal Democratic Party and Kantei Party have held a supermajority in both upper and lower houses. Political stability was finally restored, and many people prospect current administration will probably last at least several years, and we have confidence. And also, many people expect the economic growth and recovery. This week, under these changed political, economic, and social background, we have the 10th USJI week from Wednesday to Monday next week. This week's seminar and events cover diverse topics, and I'm confident that these seminars will satisfy the need and expectation of researchers, academics, policymakers, and people in general. This morning, we are very fortunate to have a symposium on the topics of how can the Obama and Abe administration manage the alliance to promote common prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. And I would like to get permission of the speakers and audience for recording the seminars and using video through our website. And this seminar is also co-hosted by Brookings Institution. I would like to welcome moderator, Professor Yachi. Please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Brookings USJI and Gorgeous seminar on how can Obama and Abe administrations manage the alliance for promoting common prosperity in Asia and Pacific. My name is Shotaro Yachi. I'm visiting professor of Waseda University, Keio, and Tokyo University, and currently special advisor to the cabinet of the Japanese government. To begin with, let me briefly explain the main purpose of this morning's session. When Mr. Abe was re-elected as Prime Minister after the landslide victory in the House of Representatives December last year, the Japanese people wanted him to do mainly 2 things. One is the economic rebirth of Japan, which was suffering from the stagnation and deflation since 1990s. And another thing is the establishment of long-standing stable government on which Mr. Abe has been feeling special responsibility. And the House of Councilors election, July, has provided him with the great opportunity for the future in that context. On the diplomatic side, Mr. Abe started the diplomacy, which was called diplomacy that spanned the world map. And he described his diplomacy, as I said, and he has been engaged in the very, very active diplomacy, particularly for the summit meeting with world leaders, including 39 African leaders in the TICAD, which was held recently in Yokohama. His globally oriented diplomacy has been promoted, of course, based on the top priority with the excellent relationship with the United States. Actually, that relationship has been on the trust and confidence, which was characterized in the Japanese post-war history. And we want to examine the strategic partnership between our two countries in the context of the renewed political landscape in Japan, thereby finding out the way to advance the quality and the level of strategic partnership in the selected areas, including maritime security, cyber threats, military defense cooperation, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and humanitarian cooperation. We are very lucky to have an excellent 4 panelists today. And from my left hand, Mr. Jim Zumwalt, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the States for Japan and Korean Affairs of the U.S. government. And then His Excellency Kenichiro Sasae, Ambassador of Japan to the United States of America. And then Dr. Michael E. O'Hanlon, Senior Fellow of the Center for the 21st Security Intelligence and also Director of Research for the Foreign Policy Program of the Brookings Institute. And then Mr. Jun Osawa, Senior Research Fellow of the Institute for International Policy Studies, which is called IIPS, and also Visiting Fellow of the Center for the Northeast Asian Policy Studies of Brookings Institute. I don't think that they need a more detailed introduction, and their CVs I think that you have to your hands. And I'd like to ask Mr. Zumwalt first to make his presentation. Mr. Zumwalt, please.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about the U.S.-Japan partnership and U.S.-Japan alliance. I did want to thank the U.S.-Japan Research Institute for sponsoring this wonderful event and for really putting some effort into promoting Japan studies in the United States. It's very important, and I certainly admire the work you're doing. I also want to thank the other co-sponsors, Brookings and Waseda University Organization for Japan-U.S. Studies. I think it's wonderful to see this collaboration and look forward to today's discussion. I did want to, the reason I'm so happy to be here today is that I think the United States and Japan are really blessed with a tremendous opportunity over the next year to make dramatic progress in strengthening our security alliance for a variety of reasons that I want to get into. But before focusing on that, I did want to mention another area that's also very important, which is our economic relationship. And we're very excited that the Japanese government has decided to participate in TPP talks. And we see this as an indication of the Prime Minister's seriousness at pursuing economic reform. And the reason I mention this in a security speech is because fundamentally Japan's economy and vibrant economic growth in Japan are really important to the security alliance. If we have a strong partner that's vibrant and growing, that's a much better partner for us. And so we very much welcome the steps that the Japanese government's taking, and certainly been very positively impressed by the progress that the Abe government has made in pursuing economic reform. And I know today President Obama and Prime Minister Abe met in St. Petersburg, and one of the topics they talked about was our economic relationship. And I know the President, again, reiterated his welcome for Japan's participation in TPP, and I'm sure the two leaders, I haven't heard yet the outcome of their conversation, but I'm sure they talked about their mutual efforts to bring these talks to a successful conclusion. But as I said, my main message today is how the U.S.-Japan Security Alliance faces a tremendous opportunity to really upgrade our alliance in a major way. And there are a variety of reasons for that that I want to first mention, and then I'll talk about how I think we can strengthen our alliance. The first reason is that over time, of course, our alliance has matured. And since the 1997 U.S.-Japan Defense Guidelines, if you go back and read those guidelines today, they frankly sound rather quaint. At the time, they were really revolutionary. They talked about how Japan, new responsibilities that Japan would undertake as an alliance partner. At the time, that was a very important document. But Japan and the United States have moved far beyond the 1997 vision that we had outlined. Japan, since then, has sent forces to Iraq, to Kuwait, participated in Operation Enduring Freedom in the Indian Ocean, and today Japan is still contributing to anti-piracy operations in the Gulf of Aden. So we've seen a lot of areas where things we wouldn't have envisioned in 1997 have become a reality. And then of course, 2 years ago, Operation Tomodachi, where I think many Japanese people saw in a very real way the benefits of hosting American forces in Japan, where at one point we had 20,000 American service members helping in relief and recovery operations in the Tohoku region of Japan. So I think that maturity of the alliance shows us that we really need to, as two governments, try and review where we are and maybe set out a new vision for where we want to go in the future, because we've gone a lot farther than we thought we were going to go back in 1997. Another change that's occurred, I think, that will present us with an opportunity are we have some emerging and new areas of cooperation that we have not envisioned in the past. And what I mean by that is areas like cybersecurity, space, missile defense. These were not areas that were really talked much about back in the 1990s, and clearly these areas are moving to very much the center of our alliance. And so it presents us with opportunities to talk with our partner and try and set out our vision of where we want to go to strengthen our partnership in these areas. And then I think a third reason why we face a good opportunity is the changing policy priorities in the United States. The Obama administration has laid out a policy of re-emphasizing and upping our game in Asia. And this, of course, our alliance partnerships are a big part of that rebalancing strategy. And so it's a good time for us to review where we are and where we want to go with our partner Japan. The United States is acknowledging that Asia is of growing importance to the United States. We want to remain engaged in the region, and one key aspect of that policy will be our alliance partnerships with Japan. So I think from our perspective, we're very eager to talk about upping our game with Japan as we talk about upping our game in Asia. But I think the most important, and the fourth reason I'll mention why we have an opportunity, and I think this is really the most important one, are the political changes that have occurred in Japan over the past few years. And one I would mention is, I think, growing Japanese public support for the U.S.-Japan Security Alliance. There are a variety of reasons for this, I think, familiar to all of you. Certainly the changing security environment in the region. I think the Japanese public is more aware of the risks that they face in Northeast Asia. I do think that Operation Tomodachi did really reinforce to a lot of Japanese public the value of our security alliance. So growing public support provides us with political space to do more with our alliance. A second reason, though, and I think this is also important, is growing bipartisan support for the alliance. I was in Embassy Tokyo when we had a transition from an LDP to a DPJ government, and then a transition back. And I think, as is true for our alliances with other democracies, we very much desire and want to see bipartisan support for our security alliance. That's a much healthier way of dealing with the democracy. And I think one thing we have gained over the past 4 or 5 years is growing recognition by most of the political parties in Japan of the important role of the relationship with the United States. And that provides us with space then to move forward. But then the last part of political changes in Japan, of course, is the tremendous commitment of the Abe government to the U.S.-Japan Security Alliance, and the statements that the Prime Minister has made about wanting to expand cooperation with the United States. So for all of these reasons, I think there's a tremendous, a good climate and a tremendous opportunity that we have to move forward. So let me now, since I hope you'll agree with me that we have a wonderful opportunity here, talk about ways in which we hope to see strengthened security cooperation between the United States and Japan and we hope to see some announcements about some of these steps over the next year or so. One, we're very interested in Japan, the debate about formation of a National Security Council that would, the goal would be to streamline decision making. And I think certainly as a alliance partner, this is a decision for Japan to make, but if Japan goes down this path, it presents opportunities for us to talk about strengthening our alliance decision-making capability. And unlike, say, our alliance with NATO or our alliance with Korea, where we have a UN command, a very well set out means of making political decisions in a crisis, with Japan it's not as clear as it is with other alliance partners. And so it's a very good opportunity for us, should Japan decide to go down this path, for us to talk about how we can strengthen our decision-making process and really react more nimbly to deal with the crisis that might occur. A second area that we're very interested in now in Japan is the debate about the Secrets Protection Bill. And again, this is a decision for the Japanese public and the Japanese government to make. But should Japan implement this Secrets Protection Bill, again, this opens a tremendous opportunity for the United States then to come to Japan and talk about ways in which we can better communicate in secure channels and provide and exchange information as alliance partners. And like any alliance, exchange of information is very, very important. And so to the extent that we are assured about information protection in Japan, that gives us a lot more comfort in sharing more information with Japan. And so I think one potential result, if Japan decides to enact a secret protection bill, will be efforts to talk about how we can enhance secure exchange of information in order to strengthen our alliance. And so this is an area, I think, with some very positive prospects for the future. Of course, Japan also has been talking about changes to its defense doctrine and the whole concept of emphasizing more amphibious capabilities does open up opportunities for the United States to exercise and work more with Japanese counterparts to share some of the experiences we have in this area. I am from San Diego, and of course, as you know, we have a very large U.S. Marine Corps presence in San Diego at Camp Pendleton. And a few weeks ago, my father sent me the front page of the local San Diego paper. And on the front page above the fold was a large color photo of some Japanese forces landing on the beaches in California. And it was a very good headline about our alliance cooperation. And it was a little bit remarkable to me because my father in 1943 enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. He went through basic training at Camp Pendleton, and his mission then was to defend California from Japanese forces landing on the beaches. And so 60 years later, to see this very laudatory article about how we're exercising in Camp Pendleton and practicing some amphibious capabilities really showed me how far we've come. And I don't know that my father even saw the irony in that. He was just excited to see that we're working together in San Diego and thought it was a wonderful accomplishment. So I think you'll see with new Japanese defense doctrine, obviously, some new opportunities for us to work together and integrate more closely what we're doing together. We very much welcome the Abe government's decision to increase Japan's defense budget. This, of course, gives Japan more wherewithal to upgrade its capabilities and work with us more effectively. And this is something that we very much welcome and see as part of the Abe government's commitment to strengthening its security relationship with the United States. I already mentioned new areas that have developed as cyber and space. And the United States and Japan have a very vibrant cyber dialogue talking about how we can protect our critical infrastructure. This is a whole of government dialogue. It's not only about defense department issues, but about all kinds of sectors and areas. But I think each side has benefited a lot from learning from the experiences of the other side. And I'm sure we will continue to cooperate and work in this area. In space, we have enhanced our cooperation in exchanging information on space situational awareness, data sharing, other sorts of things. And I think you'll, again, going forward, see more working together in these new areas so we can enhance our partnership. Another area where I think there's some very bright prospects working together is in ballistic missile defense. And certainly Japan faces a major threat from North Korea from its missile program, as does the United States. There's a natural convergence of goals here where we can work together, and we've been very pleased with our partnership with Japan. where Japan is host of a radar site that provides both sides with some very accurate and timely data, enabling us to utilize our ballistic missile defense capability to defend ourselves from missile attack. And I think you'll see, again, going forward, more progress in this area. Another area where I'm very excited about how I think you'll see much greater cooperation and working together is among our defense industries. And I know I've talked a lot with U.S. defense industries who are very excited about working with Japanese partners for a variety of reasons. Japanese companies have a lot of very good technology. By working together, it lowers costs of developing new capabilities. So there are a variety of reasons why it's really in the interest of U.S. industry to work together with Japanese partners for co-production and co-development. But the Japanese government had imposed upon itself a lot of restrictions on exports of arms, of weapons technology, even to allies. And I think by relaxing these restrictions, it will enable our industries to work together much more efficiently, particularly in areas of ballistic missile defense, but also areas like the F-35 program. I think going forward, you're going to see much more integration and working together between our industries. And I see this as a very positive aspect of U.S.-Japan alliance. And the last area I'll mention, although there's some others as well, but the last area I'll just mention today is I think both the U.S. forces in the region and Japanese self-defense forces are very interested in enhancing joint training and exercising to enhance our interoperability, increase our readiness and mobility and sustainability. So I think you're going to see going forward a lot more working together as close alliance partners. So these are just some examples of the ways in which I think the U.S. and Japan over the next decade will really enhance our alliance partnership. And what I'm hopeful for, certainly over the next year or so, is we can lay out a vision for where we want to go and where we want to take this alliance. But I've been right now focusing a lot on bilateral aspects of U.S. and Japan. But I think another area that I'm very excited about with the U.S.-Japan alliance is moving or strengthening our bilateral alliance by increasing our regional partnership. And what I mean by that, there's really two aspects to this. One, I think you're going to see more and more the U.S. and Japan working with other like-minded countries to promote common interests. We've already been doing some of that. A good example is our Proliferation Security Initiative, where we get together. Recently, the Republic of Korea hosted an exercise where we had American, Japanese, Singapore, and Australian, and of course Koreans working together to exercise how we might monitor UN embargoes. And I think you'll see more of that, of our militaries working together with other countries on behalf of common interests. So I see this as, the way I phrase it is, we're strengthening our bilateral alliance by working together in a regional context. But another area where I think you'll see this in the regional partnership is capacity building in other places, particularly in Southeast Asia, where clearly the monitoring the maritime domain and defending maritime assets is challenging for many countries in Southeast Asia. Both the United States and Japan, as maritime powers interested in freedom of navigation, have an interest in assisting other countries who might need our help in being able to provide that kind of maritime security. So I think you'll see going forward more work with the United States and Japan working in partnership with third countries in order to enhance their capacities, particularly working with coast guards or areas like maritime domain awareness. So I think that's another area, this regional aspect of our alliance is another area that I'm very excited about. So I've talked to you a little bit about some of the areas where I think you'll see us moving forward. I'm very hopeful this fall you'll see some announcements about how we plan to move forward. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention also that implementing our existing bilateral agreements is also very important. And as everyone in this room I think knows, we have a series of agreements stemming from the mid-90s about realigning our force structure in Japan. And if I can just remind everyone, because people tend to focus on the problem areas, but if I can remind everyone of why we're doing this. And the goal of our realignment process is twofold. We want a stronger and more sustainable alliance. And I'll repeat that, we want a stronger and more sustainable alliance. Our realignment plan has 19 action areas, and most of those areas we've made tremendous progress. And most of those areas have the mutual benefit of a stronger alliance and one that's more sustainable. Everyone sort of understands the stronger part, so let me just mention the sustainable part. And what I mean by sustainability is, as two democracies, we need to retain public support for our alliance in order to move forward. That's the way we both recognize that. And so we need to make sure that the Japanese public remains committed to our alliance. And so we recognize that efforts to reduce the impact of our presence in places where we're concentrated is one way of ensuring that our alliance remains politically sustainable. And particularly in the Kantei Plain and in Okinawa, where our forces tend to be concentrated, we've made a lot of efforts to reduce the impact of our presence, partly by moving facilities or moving capabilities to less crowded areas, away from urban areas to less crowded areas, and also ultimately we'll be moving forces off of Japan to other places in the region, which has a benefit for us of dispersing our forces in ways that we think provides other benefits. The Japanese government has been a tremendous partner in this arrangement and constructed a lot of very wonderful facilities to enable us to move from one place to another. A very good example of that, which hasn't been talked about much in the United States, is at Iwakuni, where the Japanese government built a wonderful runway offshore where our planes will be able to take off and land over water. And so ultimately we'll be moving our carrier air wing from Atsugi, which right now is in the middle of a city, a very noisy place to have or a very crowded place to have a noisy airport, to a place where our planes will be taking off and landing over water. And that's obviously, much better for both sides to have that kind of capability. It's only possible because the Japanese government has invested tremendous resources in constructing this beautiful new facility. So this is an example of how our realignment efforts have been working. But of course, what everyone is focusing on is certain aspects of our realignment package in Okinawa that have yet to be implemented. We're very pleased that the Abe government is very committed to the existing realignment plan. Their central government's working very closely with local authorities in Okinawa, and we're very hopeful that we can move forward with those aspects of our alignment as well, because I think it's very positive if we can move some forces from Okinawa to Guam, and also if we can move some forces from the crowded southern third of the island up to the north, where they can remain in the region and provide the security benefits that they provide, but have less impact on the local population. So we're very hopeful that we can continue to move forward with our realignment roadmap as well. And I think the combination of implementing our existing agreements on realignment and with the potential for expanding our alliance further, we have a very bright opportunity to move ahead. And just in conclusion, I'll mention, the reason I'm so optimistic about what we're doing is not only because we have this tremendous opportunity, but because both sides are committed to strengthen the alliance. And I think the foundation of our strengthened alliance is the shared values and the shared interests that we have. And so clearly, days like today when President Obama is meeting with Prime Minister Abe and talking about issues in the world, I'm sure they're talking about Syria, about North Korea, about other areas where we share mutual concern. This kind of high-level communication, of course, is really is really very important to our security alliance. So going forward, I'm very, as I said, optimistic and hopeful that you'll see a lot of progress over the next year, some announcements about some ambitious goals that we'll be setting for ourselves. But if you think back again to the '97 defense guidelines, that time when we announced those guidelines, a lot of people were amazed that for the first time Japan was committing to support U.S. forces outside the area of defense of Japan, but also for assuring regional peace and security. That was a very seminal, very remarkable agreement, and Japan talked about providing rear area support to U.S. forces, for example, back in '97. That was a big step forward, but now looking back on that, Japan has already exceeded the goals that we set for ourselves in '97. So I think it is time for us to articulate a new set of goals so we can point toward an even better future. So thank you very much for your attention today. I look forward later to your questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Yachi, and also Jim, thank you very much for reminding me and us how much deep relationship we have, and also how many challenges and topics we are covering. It's an amazing list of the issues you just laid down. That means that we need to work hard. But well, having said it, I would like to start from what Jim said at the end of his presentation in the context of how both governments could manage the alliance for the Asia-Pacific continent. So he said that we share the fundamental values and goals. And this is again becoming more relevant and important at this time of history, I would say. Because, we more or less, I say, share the fundamental values and goals, and like democracy and human rights and rule of law, and and all this respect of human rights and so forth. Although the Cold War is ended globally, and we kind of tend to forget it, but the remnants of Cold War still exist in Asia Pacific. We all know it. In the Korean Peninsula, we have wages of Cold War, and the situation there is possibly worse than the days of Cold War. When it comes to North Korean tensions there. And in other part, is the ideological competition over? Yes, possibly yes. If you look at the Asia situation, most of the countries in Asia are now democracy or moving into democracy in their own way. If you look at the situation, say 1970s or 80s, we weren't quite sure about it. But after 30 years, it is obvious that most of the ASEAN countries are democracy. Even a country like Myanmar, say, they are not really fully democratized yet, but I'm talking about the directions countries are moving. And so I think we have to be confident about our values and belief. Although there are differences of the situation depending on the country, but still I think the history is on our side. I think that's a very important departing point for the alliance to work together. And in doing so, I think all this sense that we care and cherish about those values and goals is more important in the context of a strategic alliance between Japan and the United States. And in doing so, I think, as Jim laid out, there are two things we need to keep going. One is the economic, recovery. It is obvious that in order to sustain, even strengthen our capacity, I would say, to engage or do something meaningful, forcefully in diplomatic terms, we need to have a strong economy. That is obvious. So what the Prime Minister Abe is doing under this banner of Abenomics is something we have been waiting for some years, and that's what we need to see realized together with the United States. And we also hope that the United States will be on the right recovery track of the economy. And as you know, what Bank of Japan is doing is more or less what the Federal Bank of Reserve has been doing over the years, this inflationary target and monetary easing. And also when it comes to fiscal policy and tax policy and other macroeconomic policy, we have different but similar kind of challenges, I think. As a democracy, it is not easy to get the consensus in the pluralistic system working on. It takes time, endurance, but at the end of the day, it shows the strength of democracy. That's why what I want to stress at this point. And the second thing is that in doing so, this TPP, just Jim mentioned, will be a good catalyst for both countries to work on. And this is important, not in terms of, I would say, stimulations for the domestic economic reform and more open system, but also in terms of getting alliance stronger especially in the context of American rebalancing toward Asia. Because I think American presence is very important, not only military and political, but also economic one too. So for that reason, I think we continue to address this issue together with the United States. And obviously, as we joined lately in this TPP exercise, and we are now in the process of quickly coming into full negotiation with the participating countries, including the United States. Negotiating team will be coming to Washington soon, and they will be engaged in thorough discussions, and I hope that the discussion will be heading into the right directions. And we know that this goal is to get this done before the end of the year. I think we are ready to cooperate with that goal in taking into account some of the sensitivities involved. America also has its own sensitivity, but I think, as allies, we need to recognize the problem of each other and try to care about each other, and that's what I believe we can do. Now, on the security front, I think the fundamental situation in Asia Pacific is not something that we are very much optimistic in the short run. And North Korea is not easy, and it continues to be a difficult one when we talk about democracy, and they have a name of democracy in the country's name. But even before that, we have to address the serious security question. And Jim said that we have to prepare for the future. That is right. I think that we have been doing. But at the same time, we have to choose a proper moment to get into more serious dialogue with DPRK. And that doesn't mean that we will get into talks without any sufficient prospect for the successful negotiations, because we can't repeat the same stuff. We can't repeat the same parks and suspensions, and then brinkmanships and suspensions and parking, and we have seen many times. I think we have to review all these past examples and come up with some innovative solution to the approach, and having North Korea engaged in the process. Now, I think in doing so, we need to step up more of the strategic and collaborating dialogue, not only between Tokyo and Washington, but also Seoul and Beijing and Russia. I think the North Korean could be one of the issues where I think the countries in the region could test how they can work together, and having its own problem, domestic and foreign. But I think unless the six parties could work together on this issue, I think there is no future for the very stable order in the region. Now, about the other security agenda being addressed, I think most of the security dialogue has been making progress quite well. And even on these difficult issues of realignment and stem relocation issues, and it's still on the way. But I think the fundamental direction we are heading for is the right one. I think we are talking with the American Congress and the American government and Japanese government are trying to be more communicating with Okinawa government and people, and so that we could move ahead. And I think important thing is that we need to keep on track, not really deviating some of the goals we set out initially. Now, on the other security agenda, I completely agree with Jim, on whether it's cyber and outer space, or some of the bilateral security agenda, including joint productions of fifth generations of fighter and so forth. The other day, I visited Lockheed Martin to see how the things are going. And it's amazing that there they are introducing Toyota's way of assembling, and so that they could make the production more speedy and effective. And I was very much impressed how they were collaborating, not only in terms of this sharing of the technology, but the way you would produce the things. I think that was very much encouraging to me. And finally, although we share the fundamental values and goals and vision and so forth, and even operative terms, we have a major agreement. I think the important thing is that we shouldn't really take the alliance for granted. I think that would require day-by-day effort on both sides to see how the other situation is like. It's a bit like wife and husband, you know. You say, hello, how are you? And how are you doing? What is the program? Is there anything I can do for you? And so forth. Well, that's what I think we need to do. And sometimes you tend to hold the cooperation alliance for granted. And that's, I think, what we need to be careful. And especially against the background of we have to be faced with all these different views. We are the democracy, so there are a lot of different views expressed, even criticize the government. But in coping with those voices, I think we need to be caring about each other and knowing all the program inherent, then still try to find the best way to go ahead together. Now, finally, I want to say that as a result of Japanese economy coming back again and more stable governance and political stability, and there is a growing, I would say, interest, not only from Washington, but also the United States. And there are more people going to Tokyo, and I see here more senators going and visiting Tokyo this summer. As an ambassador, I'm glad to see that. And also, there are more conversations taking place, not only between the leaders, but also the various different kinds of sectors, increasing and to reevaluate, I would say, importance of each other. I think this USJI forum is a part of that, and I'm very much happy to be a part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Ambassador, and others. It's a real honor to be up here with you, and I appreciate your comments and how well you've been making the alliance work. And I proceed from the starting point that the alliance is very strong, and that the Japanese government is now also becoming somewhat more stable in its likely longevity, and we have an opportunity here to reach a new level of cooperation. But because we're such good allies and friends, I think we can also have more honest, open, and sometimes difficult conversations about the key issues of the day. And so, because I'm unencumbered by any government responsibilities, I'll just throw out a couple of ideas where I think that perhaps we can acknowledge, or at least I would advocate, that the US-Japan alliance has some room for disagreement. And let me just talk about a couple of issues where I'd like to suggest some either new ideas or flexibility should current efforts not succeed as well as we would like. And I'd like to touch on a couple, including Syria, including the Senkaku Islands, including Okinawa realignment. And again, the important point is to underscore, I do this only because I'm so confident that the bedrock of the alliance is robust, that we can therefore afford to admit when we may have different perspectives or when we may need to shake up the policy process in the years ahead. Let me begin with Syria very briefly, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but my message on Syria is simple. I think Japan should say and do what it wants. I believe there's a very strong case that President Obama is correct, that even those of us who are frustrated by his relatively restrained approach towards the broader Syrian civil war should support his drawing of a clear red line on the August 21st tragedy in which up to 1,500 Syrian civilians were brutally killed by a chemical weapons attack, which apparently is the worst in 25 years anywhere on the international stage. And this is not a remote problem for Japan, because one of the target audiences of any American-led response is North Korea. And the reason I mention this is because I think the red line here has to do with the proliferation and use of weapons of mass destruction. And we all know that North Korea is one of the top problem countries in this domain. And I believe President Obama is correct to say that not only his own credibility, but world credibility and deterrence are on the line. Admittedly, the chemical weapons use in Syria is a different thing from Iran perhaps pursuing a nuclear weapon, or North Korea perhaps expanding its arsenal further. But there is an interlinkage. And I tend to agree with the President that, in fact, this is the right place to draw the line. But it's a judgment call. And if the Japanese government disagrees, I believe the Japanese government is at a point where it should feel unencumbered about openly disagreeing with the United States. There's no reason the US-Japan alliance should have to operate from different rules than the US-UK alliance, or the US-France alliance, or many of our European alliances, where we tend to have more disagreements. And sometimes that is not as reassuring. Sometimes that's certainly not as enjoyable for people like my friend Secretary Zumwalt, but nonetheless, where I think it is appropriate when mature democracies have differences of view. So I hope Prime Minister Abe and the Japanese government and people will support President Obama in not only the immediate decisions in the coming days, but the broader path forward in Syria. But I also would respect a Japanese disagreement. And by the way, I'm not here just to give sort of a happy message towards Japanese friends. I'll come back in a second on another issue and suggest where I think perhaps the Japanese position may have to change, or where the United States should feel free to disagree with Japanese friends. In fact, let me do that right now, and it's the Senkaku Islands. And I agree again with Secretary Zumwalt that the US-Japan collaboration on military exercises in California was impressive. But I'll admit to you, I get nervous when I see too many amphibious exercises by the United States and Japan, because the message is clear, the target audience is clear, and the implication is that the alliance might think about seizing back the Senkaku Diaoyu if China ever was foolish enough to take them. Now, as I've said, if China is foolish enough to take the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, it would be a tragedy, and it would be entirely Beijing's mistake. But that does not necessarily mean our smartest response is symmetrical. Our smartest response could begin by trying to bring the International Court of Public Opinion against China. It could then extend perhaps to certain forms of economic sanctions, even though we all realize from the rare earth metal dispute of a couple of years ago, that could hurt us just as much as it hurts China. I accept that and acknowledge that, but it still could be preferable to a symmetrical response with military force. I'm not suggesting that we rule out options today, but I am suggesting we be careful about the implication that any kind of Chinese aggression needs to be met directly and symmetrically. That may not be the wisest course, especially for something like the Senkaku Islands. I also would suggest personally, and I'm not an international legal expert, but I have been trying to understand more of the law of the sea and how it applies to the Senkaku Islands and similar kinds of land formations in the East China Sea and South China Sea. And I'm increasingly open to the idea that we should decouple sovereignty claims from economic opportunity and economic claims. In other words, perhaps Japan is 100% correct to stand by the position that the Senkakus are Japanese territory, pure and simple. But although I frankly am open to an ongoing debate on that subject, and that won't make you very happy to hear me say that. But let me say, even if the Japanese government and people stand by the very firm contention that there should be and must be no debate about who's sovereign over these islands, it doesn't mean that we have to use the Law of the Sea Treaty to assign economic rights based on sovereignty. And in fact, I think the Law of the Sea Treaty makes some mistakes in how, and it has some ambiguities in how it elevates and magnifies the importance of tiny little pieces of land in these very, very controversial waterways, such that whoever can find some 500-year-old claim to a piece of rock that they have no intention of otherwise using gains economic rights to huge amounts of territory in the surrounding waters and the seabeds below. And I'm personally of the view that we probably need to negotiate outside of a firm interpretation of the law of the sea. And in any event, I realize the Chinese are not very open necessarily to that approach, but that still may be an idea we want to contemplate. In any event, the alliance is strong enough that I think we have to avoid letting the Senkaku Island issue be somehow a litmus test for whether we are going in a warmer or a cooler direction in the US-Japan alliance. And whatever your views on what we should do next, let's recognize we can have some debates about these core issues without jeopardizing the alliance. The alliance is otherwise very solid. And in fact, I don't know that there is a Japanese and US government disagreement on any of these Senkaku issues. I'm basically suggesting we should feel free to have a disagreement if we need to, because I worry that the way things are right now, we're trying so hard to keep Tokyo and Washington happy with each other that we're failing to find creative ways to solve a problem that could get worse with China before it gets better. So we may actually need a little more disagreement down the road. And I think we should be confident enough in the strength of our alliance to be able to have that. Another point, and I'm sort of dancing around the world from hotspot to hotspot, but while we're looking at the alliance in broad terms, and we're asking the big questions we're asking on this panel and in this forum today, and we see Prime Minister Abe now in a stronger political position than anyone since Koizumi a number of years ago, with an opportunity to think about how he wants to define Japan's future role in the world. I would submit to you that it's time for Japan to do something that historically is pretty uncomfortable for the Japanese people in the modern era, and that's think about creative ways to be part of multilateral military operations, even when you don't really want to. And I'll put a couple of ideas on the table you're probably not going to like either. Afghanistan. We could use the help after 2014. Just because we've had 50 countries in the coalition so far, just because Japan has been extraordinarily important on the economic development side in Afghanistan. I would put on the table, as an academic speaking only for myself, that 500 Japanese troops in Afghanistan would be a wonderful show of confidence in the mission, recognition of the importance of the mission after 2014, and proof that Japan wants to find new ways to be a strong security partner of the United States and the international community. And if you don't like my Afghanistan idea, Congo is another place that could use some additional strength and support. So I just think it's time for Japan to be willing to open up the dialogue a little bit more on some of these questions. We know that they've come and gone over the years. There are times where Japan has been more forward-leaning, for example, in East Timor, but that's getting to be a long time ago. And Iraq And yes, Japan was helpful in Iraq, but of course the mission there was as notable for what Japan would not do and for the help and protection that it needed to request from other countries' forces as it was for Japan taking a big new step forward. But in any event, that's also become somewhat ancient history. And I think it's time, and this is a reflection of my confidence in the alliance and my confidence in modern Japanese democracy and my awareness of how much help we need, we Americans and we, the international community, in other missions around the world, to simply and humbly put that request on the table to Japanese friends that perhaps that kind of debate could again be usefully reopened inside of Japan. One last subject and I'll wrap up. On Okinawa, and I hate to do this again to my friends, the ambassador and the secretary, because they, like their predecessors and many others in the two governments, have worked tirelessly to develop a plan that I believe is a serious plan that would be beneficial in many ways. And frankly, I believe the people of Okinawa should accept it. And I appreciate that the Abe government is behind it. Having said all of that, I'm not sure that it will be approved in Okinawa. And as an American watching our sequestration debate go on right now, I'm not sure it's the best use of yen and dollars. It's really expensive to move 8,000 Marines from Okinawa to Guam to rebuild or to build a new airfield offshore. And again, Secretary Zumwalt, I think, was correct, and I, as a private American citizen, share his appreciation and admiration for the Japanese people and government in what you've done with the air base with Atsugi. And I think that if the Japanese government is willing to spend yen on Hanako, that is also appreciated and admirable. And the Okinawan people should recognize that it's a sincere effort to make life a little easier, especially for the most densely populated southern third of the island, as Jim has just said. But it still looks pretty expensive to me. And Mike Mochizuki and I have argued over the years, and now the sequestration debate, I think, amplifies my concern, that it may not be the most promising idea politically in Okinawa, and it may not be the most affordable idea. So if it doesn't work, and by the way, let me again say to my Okinawan friends, I think you should be grateful. This is a pretty good plan. And I do think that a lot of people have spent a lot of time trying to make the Okinawan situation better and easier. And sometimes Okinawan friends, I think, should recognize that a little more than they sometimes do. So this is not simply an effort to take the side of the forces in Okinawa that politically are most resistant to this plan. But if we find that we're at an impasse, and if budgetary pressures in both countries grow even further, then the alternative that I see is to bring roughly half the Marines from Okinawa back to California, because we're downsizing the Marine Corps and the U.S. military as it is, so there's going to be room in Okinawa, or excuse me, in California or North Carolina for these forces to come home. The Marines have been at 202,000 active duty end strength. They're coming down to at least 182,000. My guess is they'll go lower than that, maybe 170 under sequestration, or even if there is a replacement budget and law for sequestration, there still may be cuts that allow for greater space in California. And what I would do is not just bring them home. That's the part Okinawans may like best and Japanese friends may like best, but to sustain the momentum of the rebalancing. And I agree with Secretary Zumwalt and the ambassador and others that this is an important U.S.-Japan initiative. To sustain the momentum, we have to compensate. And the way you compensate, in my judgment, is to create more capacity for rapid reaction, to bring those Marines from California to the Western Pacific quickly if need be. And the best way that I can think of to do that is for the U.S. and Japan together to purchase additional Marine prepositioning ships and stock them with additional equipment that we would have to buy new, because it's separate equipment from what the Marines use in training day to day. And it's the kind of concept we already use. We already have these capabilities, as you know, deployed in Guam, Diego Garcia, but I would submit we should do even more, and probably base roughly 2 to 3 large roll-on, roll-off ships in Japanese harbors with Marine Corps equipment adequate to move several thousand Marines, or to equip several thousand Marines if necessary in a crisis. The Marines would then fly from California to wherever they were needed in the region. The ships would sail, and they would be ready to unload equipment quickly. Frankly, this could allow for an even more rapid response than we could do today, because today's Marines on Okinawa would need to load up, and they would need to await multiple ferry rides of the modest numbers of amphibious ships that we currently maintain in Japanese ports. So this could actually, in a military logistical sense, improve our responsiveness at lower cost than the Hanako plan. So I would just submit to you, it's worth keeping this idea in mind, but again, I'm sending a mixed message and a nuanced message, and I don't want to sound like I'm highly critical of the existing plan. Frankly, at some point, we just got to get this issue solved. And so I actually hope that after 17 years, we can finally get the issue solved. But if we don't, let's be open enough as an alliance that we don't see this as somehow a question of our very commitment to each other, that we get pragmatic and then look for the next best approach, which might be something along the lines of what I just sketched. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the discussion myself.
And Mr. Osawa.
Thank you, Professor Yasushi. I'm John Osawa, Senior Teaching Fellow at Brookings Institute, and I am also a Senior Research Fellow at ITS in Tokyo. It's my great honor to be here today as a commentator of the panel with such a highly respected diplomats, Ambassador Sasai and Mr. Zemalt, and highly renowned scholar, Michael Handon. I really appreciate the opportunity to give a talk for all of you, a distinguished group of audience. Yeah. My left brain thinks that it is important to speak about the subject quite academically. However, my right brain feels that it is even more joyful manner. I have asked to be provocative commentator or entertainer of this panel. So, but as you know, it is my first time to speak to the audience of the United States, but actually I will follow my left brain anyway this time. You may, joking apart, let us get to the main issue. First of all, could you change the next slide? Okay, first of all, may I make sure the political situation in Japan? I think you were sure about the US, right? And my question is, how do you think about the stability of Abe administration? Because it's important to consider the stability of Japanese administration. From Nakasone Reagan to Koizumi Bush, the stability of Japanese government has been fundamental for both of countries to stay on track in dealing with the alliance. Only a stable cabinet, Japanese cabinet, could make it going ahead in history. As you know, after the Koizumi cabinet coming to end in September 2006, Japan had 6 prime ministers, as you know well. It is a situation so called the busiest factory of prime ministers in the world. For example, first Abe cabinet succeeded Koizumi, continued only 366 days. Consequently, Fukuda just a year, also 358 days. In 2009, DPJ took the majority of the House of Representatives, but the Hakuyama cabinet survived only 206 days. So, the situation had been one time disposal by minister in the history, but how do you think this Is this the end of a gradual administration? This time is different, is not. For, actually there is some pros and cons of Abe administration. The pros is more 5 points, but the cons and only 2 points. The pros is the end of the twisted parliament. LDP and its junior coalition partner have taken the majority of our House in the election of this July. This means the end of the twisted parliament, I think. And the second point is no further national election in either House until 2016. And third point for applause is continuity of high approval rating. I'll show you. The approval rating for the Abe cabinet remains high in major opinion poll surveys. The graph shows from the NHK opinion polls. You can see in contrast to its former 6 cabinets faced a rapid slide in rating. As you can see, this is the starting point of the cabinet, and first month, second month, third month, fourth month. Former 6 administrations faced landslide of the supporting rating. But this time is a little bit different because the second Abe cabinet keeps his support more than 8 months, even in August after the national election. The support rate is around 60. It depends on the opinion polls, newspapers, but the higher support rate is near 70. So this time, continuity of higher rating is continuous. So, and the fourth point, pros is no strong political competitor in the ruling party, LDP. LDP was traditionally controlled by virtue of the strengths of the party's biggest faction, sometimes absorbing in factional struggles among the factions. In these days, these faction dynamics no more exist. So Prime Minister Abe enjoyed no strong political competitor in his party. The fifth point is support from Kasumigaseki, I mean the foggy bottom of the Japanese bureaucracy. I hope that Ambassador Sasai and Professor Yachi might agree the point. People in the bureaucracy, after the 3 years DBJ anti-bureaucratic cabinet, now feel that it is the last chance to go ahead with reforms, not only in domestic, such as social security reform or fiscal reform, but also in national security and diplomacy, such as collective self-defense and the establishment of the Japanese version of National Security Council. So now Abe administration have the 5 pros, but he has 2 cons. The first point is many policy challenges. Kasumigaseki support Abe cabinet a lot. So, therefore, agencies and the ministries in Tokyo are bringing a lot of political issues into the cabinet. Then, Abe cabinet administration faces many policy challenges, such as rising the consumption tax, reform of social security, TPP, collective self-defense, National Security Council, and blah, blah. And second cons Abe administration we are facing is the opposing views in the national security reform from the coalition partner. LDP coalition partner, New Komeito, cautions about Japan's use of collective self-defense and pledges to protect Japanese pacifist constitution. So this second point is Abe administration is facing. So I don't mean that the number of pros and cons will decide the duration of Abe administration, but all of you might have a good sense to understand it is sure that the Prime Minister Abe has more freedom to get centered on the economic growth agenda, fiscal reform, and national security structure reform. So now we have a concrete political basement to demonstrate the strengths of the alliance. My second main question is, what is the vision of the alliance? What is the mission of the alliance? What are the goals and objectives of the alliance? These are what both Obama and Abe administration should share in this occasion of the geopolitical change in the region. According to the recent joint statement of the two countries in April 2012, the vision is to make the alliance as the cornerstone of peace, security, and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. The mission, it is not clearly defined. My interpretation, my opinion, that is to achieve prosperous and stable Asia-Pacific with the shared values of democracy, the rule of law, open societies, human rights, human security, and free and open markets. These mission and vision are well considered by the two governments, I think. However, they are still ambiguous for the alliance. In the situation that the alliance is facing a change of the geopolitical landscape of East Asia, especially my question is, for what purpose both of the country enhance the capability of the alliance? Yeah, China, a major political and economic power, have taken advantage of economic growth to modernize their military force by improving their defense budget and buying new weapon systems such as J-10 and some new constructed air vehicle. And it's expanding and increasing its activities in waters in both East and South China Sea. The graph shows the history of the world. You can see in 1920, China is the biggest economic power. And after 150 years later, in 2030, China will be in the same position in the 19th century. So the landscape is tremendously changing. The rise of China as a global power, it is a centurial phenomenon. It's not a thing of a few decades. With rapid growth of the economy and the best military modernization are changing the distribution of power among Asia-Pacific countries. The coverage area of the alliance, we cover the Korean Peninsula, Taiwan, Japan, including Senkaku Island, will be the littoral region where land power China meets sea power United States. The future geopolitical landscape of East Asia will be settled by two major powers, China and the United States. In addition, with China is status quo power that will continue to comply with regional and international norms, or China, a revisionist power, increasingly willing to challenge the international order that we Western country have set in these 2 centuries, will be the important factor to stability of the region. Despite its proclaiming China's peaceful rise, China acts more assertively in assuring its strategic priorities in the recent couple of years. Since then, Chinese officials and scholars have asserted core interest, the concept that something never negotiable by their very nature. Along with the usage of the core interest concept, the activities of PLA Navy and China's maritime enforcement organizations, the so-called Five Dragons, are increasing and expanding its activities in both of these China Sea and South China Sea. Okay, is the Chinese will enable activities in these 5 years. So we Japan faced such a kind of situation. You can see Chinese Navy had exercised to pass the fast island chain near Senkaku Islands and near one Okinawa Strait. So this is new phenomena allows considerable interest and increased sense of caution among surrounding countries, including Japan. As a consequence of the rise of China, strategic reactions are taking place in the region. For example, Australia, post-2030, its new strategy in 2009. Japan's dynamic defense capability is set by the DDJ, such a concept in 2010. And in the United States, Obama administration set up rebalancing strategy in 2011. Well, let us come back to the question, for what purpose both of the countries enhance the capability of the alliance? It might be obvious for all of you distinguished experts, but it never be mentioned openly. So I do not want to say you know the country, and the country who must not be named, as many wizards in the story of the Harry Potter series, then we should stop making China the Lord Voldemort of the alliance. So we have to talk a lot about how China, how make China on the track of the peaceful rise, not assertive way. So in parallel, China paradoxically feel threatened by the specter of the non-existent containment strategy. This mutual misunderstanding might create a new security dilemma in the region, and might turn it back to the future Cold War momentum. So the alliance should not be, it's my conclusion. So the alliance should not be against China, nor be considered as a tool of containment, but rather should be a safety wheels for Asian countries to ensure China not to go off the track of its peaceful rise. As you know, a few days ago, the cars in the DC Metro went off the track, and the red line is closed more than hours. But we don't hope for China to go off on the track in its future, in the future. So I'm running out of time. I'd like to put my conclusion into a few words. Japan ends a larger administration. Yes, this time is different. Political basement of administration is concrete, stable. So now the time to reconsider the role of the alliance. US and Japan should have a common vision, mission, goals, and objectives for their alliance, and make sure for what the alliance strengthens the capability and ability of the alliance. So the alliance should not be against China, nor be considered as a tool of containment, I said, but rather should be a safe wheels for Asian countries to ensure China not to go off the track of its peaceful rise. Okay, that's all my first comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for every panelist. And I think the four panelists covered almost all the important points toward the US-Japan alliance in the future. And is there any panelists to make more comments? If not, okay. I ask the audience, they ask questions from the audience. And if you have a question, I'm nominated as a person to ask a question. Please come over to that microphone and please tell your name and your affiliation. And also, I humbly ask you to limit yourself, only asking a question and don't make a long, impressive speech, please. If on that condition, may I ask anybody? Yes, please.
Oh, yes, it works. Thank you very much, Mr. Professor Yachi. So my name is Tetsuya Toyoda. I'm a fellow at the Western International Center. And my research interest is in the conflicts of the Senkaku Ryoyu Islands. And I think it is a good thing to strengthen the alliance, and it is also a good thing to strengthen the alliance in the areas to defend those islands. Because I believe it is the uncertainty and the unpredictability of the DPG administration who invited the problems. And now we are transferring that is very good. But I also share the concern expressed by Mr. O'Hanlon and also Professor Osawa that there can be some problems caused by the strengthening of the alliance. And there can be some risk of escalation because of the strengthening of the military alliance between Japan and the US, the cornerstone of the peace in East Asia. And my question is addressed to Mr. Zumwalt. How does the US government evaluate such a risk of escalation because of the efforts made by Tokyo and Washington, please? Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for that good question. And I think it gets back maybe a little bit to what Mr. Ozawa was saying, and I'd like to assure people that the mission of our alliance is not to be against anything. We're not an anti-China alliance or an anti-anything alliance. I think it's important, and that was maybe what was missing in my remarks when you asked what is the mission of the alliance. And I think we need to state the mission of the alliance in positive terms of what we're for, not what we're against. And what we're for, and this is because of our shared values and shared interests, is promoting a kind of environment in the region that can lead to regional prosperity. So we're very much, for example, in favor of maritime security, allowing nations engaging in commerce to engage in trade. That's very different than the kind of mission you were stating we should not be. And so I just wanted to say that is not our mission. And so you don't need to worry about that we're emerging into an anti-China alliance. But the second answer to Mr. Toyoda's question is I think it is true that as the United States and Japan, because we have this historic moment to really improve and upgrade our alliance, we'll need to explain to regional neighbors what we're doing and why in ways that will be reassuring to them. And I think the way we can do that is by talking about our shared interests and how we want to promote things that are actually good for countries in the region.
Ken Meyer for World Docs. It's my understanding that the status of the Senkakus was left rather murky under the terms of our Mutual Defense Pact with Japan, which seems like we could have told Japan we take no position over sovereignty of the Senkakus, you'll just have to work it out with China. Instead, as I understand it, we've given Japan an implicit guarantee over the Senkakus. Is that comparable to the British guarantee to Poland in the lead up to World War II? In other words, has the World War II line to die for Danzig been superseded by the line to die for Daihaku?
These guys may or may not chime in a second, but let me begin with my thinking on this. There's no doubt the United States would take any Chinese assault on the Senkaku Ryoyu Islands extremely seriously. I think the United States government's been pretty clear on that. However, what the United States government hasn't wanted to say and shouldn't say in advance is what an American response would be. And I think In fact, my earlier comments were designed to suggest that we maybe keep our full range of possible options, but move a little bit more towards non-military options, threatening even stronger critiques from your line of thinking, should there actually be a crisis. But the British pledge to Poland was about Poland's inherent territorial sovereignty and the protection of its people and its core economic centers of gravity. That's not comparable to this case. The Senkaku Islands, however much Japan's claims may be legitimate, are a very tiny landmass. And the real issue has to do with historical sovereignty and pride, but also the economic zones around them. So I would just be careful about the analogy. And in fact, if we pound ourselves on the chest and make this a test of our manhood, if the crisis comes someday, I think we may actually be making a mistake. There may be more asymmetric ways to de-escalate it that are still firm. And I know that Japan and the United States are going to keep those options and not prejudge how they would respond in a given case. The last point, which is just to summarize, is none of our mutual defense pacts around the world spell out in advance exactly what we will do in the event of an aggression against one of our alliance partners. People have this impression, they talk about nuclear umbrellas and, the alliance. If you look at NATO, for example, NATO says if there's an attack on one alliance member, everyone will view it collectively as an attack on each other, but then they will take appropriate means as they define them in response. And I think that's the right kind of flexibility you want in a situation or a case like this.
I want to say something to supplement what I said. Well, in terms of, you compared the situation, Poland and Britain, I think the situation is completely different. We are quite comfortable about the strong United States commitment under the bilateral security arrangement. It was clear that this Senkaku Island is under Japanese administration. United States is committed to apply those alliance commitments to the island. That was made clear. I think that would be sufficient. I don't think this commitment shouldn't be doubted, whether by China or Japanese and American people. I'm confident about it.
The other point I would make to your question is, the United States, Japan, and China all have tremendous common interests. And so I think the governments are going to continue working together to advance our shared interests. And clearly, conflict in the region is not in anyone's interest. It's not something anyone seeks. And I'm sure you'll be seeing all three governments working very hard to promote positive and constructive relationships among each other.
Actually, from the viewpoint of Japanese security expert.
With Mike?
Yeah, it's working. Exactly. So the problem is China wants to change the status quo through use of physical force is unacceptable for us. So if some kind of basement line, Japanese position. Yeah.
Thank you. Being along with Hong Kong Phoenix TV. I know Mr. Archie said we can only ask one question. I just threw out two because I really have too many. First, to follow up the Senkaku one, as Michael mentioned, the US and Japan should feel free to have disagreement. So questions to the Secretary and the Ambassador, is there any difference or disagreement between US and Japan on this issue? And when the Secretary mentioned you encourage to engage the third country and the regional partnership, does that include China? And the second question on the US and Japan alliance, today the President and the Japanese Prime Minister met each other. But 2 days ago, the White House actually, they said there's no time for this summit. So some people read this as the President Obama only wants to meet the Japanese Prime Minister when he needs his help on issues like Syria and North Korea. And I wonder what is your response? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, on the Senkaku, I don't think there is any difference of views between Tokyo and Washington when it comes to Senkaku. And I think often the case, if there is any difference, as the Japanese say in public that this is our territory, right? United States that, the United States doesn't take position when it comes to the territorial questions. But at the same time, as I said, it made clear that the security alliance will be applied to that island. I think for the moment that will be sufficient. And coming back to this Dr. O'Hanlon positions, I think it's a little bit possibly too much for you to say that it is healthy to have a disagreement between Japan and the United States. Yes, often the case, it is so. But when it comes to this fundamental security issue, you don't think that the possibly Senkaku is a matter of security. But I think it involves a lot of security, not simply a small island issue that involves the entire regions. So why the Vietnam and the Philippines are battling hard with China, I think it's not simply for the sake of little islands. It's more of how the basic posture to the other countries around. So I think it's more a matter of, generic Chinese positions in parallel with its rise in the East Asia. This issue is seen in that context, not simply just little and that bickering on the island. So I would say that when it comes to that strategic impression, there should be no room for the disagreement on the fundamental issues like this.
I just have one, you can go first. Yeah.
I think it's also important to put this issue in context. There are around the world over 100 cases of countries that have disagreements about territorial issues. This is not unusual. The United States has differences with our neighbors about our territory. We still have very positive and productive relationships with countries, even though we might disagree about an island or some part of the sea or some other issue. So our policy, not only on the Senkakus, but around the world, when there are territorial disputes, is we very much encourage the nations who are engaged or have it to maintain very positive and good relations, and that's what we like to see in various kinds of issues. Regarding the point about engagement for Japan and China, both Japan as our ally and partner in the region is a very important partner, and President Obama meets with Japanese leaders frequently. He also meets with Chinese leaders frequently as well, because we have a partnership with China. We work together. The agenda items on many of our issues are the same. We talk with both, for example, Japan and China about North Korea, and I think we all share interest in seeing denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that our shared interests are tremendous, and it really is in all of our interests to work together hard to advance those shared interests. And so I don't want to too much be talking about possibilities of conflict, because I think our shared interests are so great that we're going to work hard to advance those shared interests.
Before you talk, I'd like to respond to your second question. I think it's simply the matter of finding a slot for the meeting on one day, because I think President Obama is coming into St. Petersburg late in the afternoon, and the Prime Minister is leaving on the evening and on the same day. So I think we are trying to work out some of the possible slot for the meeting. That took time, and it wasn't sure that we could do it, but at the end of the process it worked out. That's a fact, I just want to say. And there are no other things involved.
And And I wanted to follow up if I could. I appreciate very much the ambassador's earlier points about how we shouldn't make a virtue of disagreement, and it's especially useful on an issue like the Senkaku Islands, where we don't want to send the wrong message. We don't want to invite adventurism or revisionism by China. And so I think it's important to make it quite clear, as the US government has done very well with people like Secretary Zumwalt and Secretary Clinton and now Kerry and President Obama, that in fact the United States takes extremely seriously any hypothetical military conflict over any part of the Pacific, East Asian land masses that are administered by Japan, and that any such conflict would require a very serious American response. That part I agree with. But I think both sides, let's say there were a crisis, and this is where I can speculate in a way that government officials probably don't want to and probably shouldn't. But let's say there were a crisis. And let's say we had a disagreement between Tokyo and Washington about how to respond. And we had two different serious possible responses. And one country wanted to use economic sanctions and perhaps more American military and Japanese military bases in the southern Ryukyu Islands, maybe adding our capability, but no direct counter-assault to a Chinese aggression. And the other country wanted to either quarantine this new Chinese outpost or directly attack it. I think that would be a debate, a disagreement we should have. And ideally, you'd want to do it quietly. And ideally, you'd come to the right answer, which I've already tipped my cap on, or my hand on where I think an asymmetric response in some of these situations, as long as it's firm and it draws clearer lines in advance of any possible subsequent aggression, is the preferred way to go. But that kind of an issue, that's where we can feel free to have some disagreement. Or let's say that there's an impasse, as there is today, about how to resolve this problem with China. Now, it's not an issue that directly concerns the United States, but the broader question of the law of the sea and how it applies to all these territorial disputes, not only in the Western Pacific, but as the Secretary has said, more generally around the world, we may need some creative, fresh thinking on this. We shouldn't be prevented from having some new ideas and some new diplomatic démarches just because it might give the impression that Tokyo and Washington are not exactly in lockstep. There may be a utility to opening up the debate on how to start a diplomatic process to resolve some of these issues. And I don't think we should be scared by that prospect, because the alliance is strong enough and we're committed enough to each other on these core interests that we can afford, I think, sometimes to take a little bit of a gamble in the interest of overcoming a roadblock that may be dangerous if we leave it alone. We don't want to be paralyzed by fear of some degree of alliance dissent and then not be able to come up with fresh creative approaches to some really serious issues that perhaps are more serious if left unaddressed than they would be with some creative good thinking.
Sorry, I wouldn't take my time, but I think now the emphasis of both Washington and Tokyo is not really trying to inflate the issues. It's more to, I would say, contain the issue and try to engage, I would say, China in more of the open dialogue. And I think and that's the stance. And we have never thought China is an enemy, and China is a friend. I think there is only concern about they have been doing, whether it is a military build-up or whether it is an aggressive stance taken on the island's maritime domain. And I think we hope that China would moderate its own approach to the countries around it so that the people feel more comfortable. I think that's the message we continue to send. We never ourselves try to provoke, and we continue to take very calm and peaceful stance. That's what we are hoping for. And on that one, I don't think there is any disagreement between Washington and Tokyo. And we are not really talking about the future scenario where we will be fighting war or putting any sanctions or whatever. talking itself will be giving a wrong signal, wrong thing to do. I don't think China government would be thinking the same way either. So we are asking for each other to be nice to each other. That's what I want to say.
My name is Yoshihide Soya, Professor of Political Science at Keio University in Tokyo, currently a Japan scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center. And I would like to stay away from Senkaku and move into some different difficult issue in other way. I perfectly agree with Ambassador Sasai in identifying a mega trend in the region, more toward democracy and freedom. My related questions are two, with respect to that. Japanese government talks a lot about so-called value diplomacy, and I would like to invite Mr. Yachi to come in if you are willing. My question is, rather than talking about it, what is the substance and tools on the part of the Japanese government to move along with this emphasis on the importance of values? And specifically, previously, at least during the Cold War period, Japan was somewhat hesitant in talking openly about values and these universal issues. But I think correctly emphasized the importance of economic development and social stability as a prelude to democratization in Asian countries under Asian complex situations. Did that change in the Japanese government approach, or is there any new approach to promoting democracy? That's the first question. The second question, if the democratization process is a mega trend, I think the final showdown should be democratization of China. And even though it's not going to happen in the immediate future, and however the process may be complicated, I think as long as we get along with that mega trend, I think we have to have that somewhere in our conceptual framework at least. And my question is for Japan and the US. Is there any sort of way of cooperating between Japan and the US in extending our sort of contacts into Chinese civil society or liberal internationalists, I think, who want in their hearts democratization of China badly? And again, even though this is not going to happen in the immediate future, I think it should be normal in the long process toward moving toward realizing democracy in Asia. And those are the two questions.
Thank you very much. We're moving to well, actually, Ms. Abe is promoting the diplomacy that spans the world map. And he wants to increase the friends who share values in the world, actually. And values means human rights, or democracy, rule of law, and so on. And particularly in relation to China, we want China to become more democratized and respect more universal or common values shared by the many countries. And whether China will go democratic or not is a matter which Chinese people must decide by themselves. But at the same time, the influence and even the impact on which Chinese will make over the world, or the people in the world, are so tremendous. And we cannot say that that's the matter of the China, and we don't care about which direction they go. And so Mr. Ambassador Sasai is quite right. We want to have an excellent, good relationship with China. We have never seen China as an enemy, but we want China to respect more important common values. That is what we have been thinking. And it's not so easy for them to go that direction. And I personally have the experience to talk with the Chinese leaders, and they have many, many problems, not only the domestic one, but also internationally. But the Chinese people are such a long history. They have a great wisdom, they have a great experience, and I strongly hope that they would come along with what we really appeal to them. And one more thing, also I agree with Ambassador Sasai, so for the Chinese leaders to come to the places for dialogue and consultation with the Japanese leaders, and to talk frankly about the future of our relationship. I hope that this can be a part of a response to the question to Professor Soya. Maybe somebody else, please.
I just want to add to your comment on what can be done to promote, sort of values. And I think the most important thing that we can do, and this isn't just governments, this is really all of us, including academic institutions and think tanks, is promote personal exchanges to enhance mutual understanding. And one good example of that is this, I very much admired the seminar that you run, bringing Japanese, Korean, and Chinese students together to talk about Northeast Asia regional security issues in a very intense setting over a few weeks. And when I visited your seminar, you would have been really pleased because there were some honest disagreements that were expressed quite frankly amongst the young people, but they were all of them speaking in English with each other, very articulate. And I think they left the seminar with a greater understanding of some other points of view that they might not have understood beforehand. And those kinds of efforts to bring young people together for honest discussions, I think ultimately will lead, those people are going to be leaders in the business and government community or academic communities in their respective countries. And so I'm hoping efforts such as yours, multiplied many hundreds of times in other places as well, can lead to enhancing sort of mutual understanding, because I really do fundamentally believe we all have common interests in regional peace, stability, and creating the right environment for prosperity. And I think that will lead to the kinds of changes in the region we seek. So to me, that's one of the keys, is efforts to further promote mutual understanding, maybe focused on young people.
Yeah. Well, I would underline what Jim said, the importance of deepening exchanges and expanding exchanges. As all of you know, that there was the lock-on of the radar owned by Chinese, marine ships toward Japanese ships some time ago, and there was a debate. Did they know that the impact of these things in terms of common rules understood by the marine forces around the world? So I think the exchange is important, and the Chinese, military people need to exchange with American and Japanese military people, and we welcome Chinese, participation in this impact exercise, and I think that is good. You know how things are doing and done, and what is the rule of the engagement, contact, and all the things, and so that we could avoid some of the misunderstanding, especially on the ground and the sea.
Please go ahead.
Actually, I remember 6 years ago, the value-based, 6 years ago, 2006, the value-based diplomacy that Professor Toya mentioned before, it was established in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the Foreign Minister Aso and the Prime Minister Abe. The momentum of the value-based diplomacy was pure among the young officials in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because we have been educated in the democratic system more than 65 years. So we including me, we are the children of the freedom system with legal democracy. And the momentum is pure, so this value is good, very good for young generation. So we have to promote the value toward all the world, especially in the developing country. But after that, we had many study in the institute to reconsider the value-based diplomacy. And the conclusion is, from viewpoint of many foreigners, the value-based diplomacy could be regarded as the value-pushing diplomacy. So actually, it's not push the value to the European country, but so we recognize that it is serious problem. So. But now we change the name of the strategy and not use so much about the value. We think that this is the diplomacy, such a kind of work with developing country to promote its own democracy, such as to support the making some bills of election, or some bills for voting, or some bills of civil society, or something like that. So we sent expert to building, making bills and laws to the developing country. Just advise how they will make such a kind of laws or bills for a more democratic way. So that's the point I would like to comment to the question. So it may be a room for the alliance to promote some kind of step-by-step democratization in China. So first of all, we have to in touch with some environmental issues, something like that. But the process is just on the incremental, step by step, not push the buttons. So that's my comment.
I saw the two person, young lady, and then the gentleman.
Hello, I'm Kelly Mann with Fuji TV. I'd like to direct my question to Secretary Zumwalt. In light of the importance of continuing dialogue with North Korea to the U.S. and Japanese interests, what do you make of the rescinding of the invitation to Robert King on Friday? And is there any information forthcoming that you might add today?
We were surprised, and I have nothing to add to that.
My name is Kikuchi, and I'm with Washington Research and Analysis. I've been in this area since 1966 and have observed a lot of discussions of this nature. Dr. O'Hanlon's reply to the previous questioner reminded me of the first TV debate between Kennedy and Nixon. Would the U.S. go to war against China if Quemoy or Matsu and Quemoy were attacked? And so anyone should look at Matsu and Quemoy for that discussion. My real question is about the proposed, or the, let's say, the way to change the Japanese constitution, specifically Article 9. Now, talking with many of my American friends, they say, oh, that constitution and that Article 9, MacArthur gave it to Japan, and it's antiquated, time to change. And I'd say that actually for 60-some years, almost 70 years, a democratic Japan has steadfastly refused to change that, amend Article 9, because in their memory, World War II was started by a dictatorial, totalitarian military government, which was, with some foreign help, destroyed. And now the civilian peaceful government took over, and they said, never again, no more war. Japan will not resort to force to resolve any issues. Now, when Mr. Abe met Mr. President Obama, I'd have thought that he'd have told President Obama, look, can you wait a little longer? Try diplomatic, because your ally, Japan, will not resort to force. We cannot resort to force. And our allies should not resort to force if there is any possibility of a diplomatic resolution. I'm wondering what the U.S. sentiments are towards this proposed, I think Mr. Abe is moving for it, for more active military participation by Japan in areas of conflict that U.S. has taken the lead. I don't think the results of Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan would have changed even if Japan went and shot at people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wow. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I agree. Some of the things you said, especially about the point that even if there is a effort now underway to reinterpret the Constitution in the context of collective security, defense, and so forth, there is no change whatever for the fundamental of peace diplomacy we established after the end of the war. I think there is a strong consensus in Japan and Japanese public. We would never go into old days, before the war days, where the civilian government was very much weak and dictated by the military things and so forth. But that doesn't mean that while we search for our appropriate international role, befitting on sort of wish to work for the peace, not for the war, I would say. For example, some of the interpretations that has been addressed for some years is about how could we do about peacekeeping operation. This is nothing to do with the war or so forth. It's more on how we cooperate with the United Nations and so forth. Our self-defense force can't, even protect civilians working for the peacekeeping operation with us, or we can't really work together with other UN keepers. So this is some of the things I think the country is now redefining what we need to do, should do more for the sake of the peace, not really going back to the old days. I think nobody nowadays, in 21st century, is willing to think about some of the things that countries are sending forth to invade it for its own military interests and so forth. And I'm not really talking about the how we would send the forces and so forth in the Iraqi, Afghan and so forth. I think the issue is more on the how we could do more in a way to be appreciated, I would say. But in doing so, we also recognize the importance of having good dialogue, not only with the American and other allies, but also our neighbors, because there is some, I would say, stereotype, I would say, thinking and some of the ideological bias thinking views about the meaning of this exercise. So I think this is still the evolving process, and we shall see also the public debate in Japan, but I'm convinced that there should be a proper role to be played by Japan for the international security, not really changing the fundamental spirit of peace diplomacy.
I agree with Ambassador Sasai. But in the debate about the revision of the Constitution of Japan, we are too much focusing on the Article 9 issues. Because as you know, Japanese Constitution is built more than 55 years ago, 65 years ago. So we have to renovate such a kind of old building, 65 years old building. So we have to, we would like to want to change the living room, the kitchen, and bathroom or bedroom. Maybe Article 9 is a living room, but we don't want to paint out the whole of the living room with a red color or something like that. We will continue to keep in my pacifist way. There was many constitutional revision debate in Japan several years ago. For example, my institute, IFES, published the whole revision articles of the possible coming new constitution. In that debate, is not only focused on the Article 9, but also we focus on such a kind of respect for the right of others. For example, the protection of human rights of foreign nations living in Japan. So we put on the many the innovation program in the revision of the Constitution, not only focus on the Article 9. That's my comment. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just add that I don't want to talk about the, because your question was what do Americans think, and there's a room full of Americans here who probably have a variety of opinions. But from the perspective of the government, we don't think it's appropriate to comment upon the internal decision-making process going on in Japan. It's a Japanese decision to make, and we'll be respectful of the outcome of the democratic process.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid the time is up. And with your great cooperation, I think we had a very useful and significant discussion time. And I would like to close this session. Thank you very much.